the Fifth Generation Leadership Podcast with Grant and Rod. All right, so I'd like to introduce, well, first of all, welcome to the Fifth Generation Leadership Podcast with Grant and Rodney.
Hey, everybody.
Today we have Devon NuDelman on, who served in the Army for a long time. I don't remember off the top of my head. It was something like 27 years. And retired at the rank of 06 as what we call a bird colonel, and worked in logistics. And he's on with us today. We're going to talk about everything from leadership styles, things that worked over the course of his career and things that didn't, social changes in the Army specifically, which is a huge point of interest for Rodney and I, being Army guys. And then also just get into some interesting stuff about logistics and munitions, especially with what's going on in Europe right now. So without further ado, welcome, Devon.
Hey, thanks, Grant. And yes, and so just to correct the record just a little bit, so I was airborne infantry there for a number of years too before I became an officer. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's a total of about almost 34 years total.
So prior, sorry for interrupting. So prior enlisted then, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, awesome.
Airborne infantry.
You went to the dark side. What's up with that, sir? Okay.
So to get started, let's talk about that. How long were you on the enlisted side? And did you serve in any leadership positions on the enlisted side before you switched over?
I did not. I went in immediately after high school. And the reason I went in is because I'm an idealist, and I have been since I can remember. I don't remember not being an idealist. Wasn't really that excited to go after profit or money or anything other than the Army. The Army, to me, back in the day, they had a commercial out, which was a pretty good commercial actually, and the slogan was, "It's the Army. Join the Army. It's not a job, but it's an adventure." So I was looking for an adventure when I was a young man, 18, 19, after high school, and so those two things combined were a good recipe for me. I was an idealist, and I was looking for adventure. So I told the recruiter exactly. He didn't find me. I found him. I drove myself to the office. I told him what I wanted. I told him I didn't want to be in an office. I didn't want to be behind a desk. I wanted to be in the field doing things. And then he kind of led me down the airborne infantry road. And I did that for four full years.
And what years was that? Like what was going on in the country at the time?
So 1985 to 1989, and our great, fantastic president Ronald Reagan was the president in 1985. And to tell you the truth, go ahead.
Sorry. Just to recap, this was also because I feel like I've heard this story many times before from like a lot of like veterans or older commissioned, older enlisted people that have been in the game for a while. A lot of people did join the military to travel the world. That was kind of like a popular concept almost at that given time, right? And in the 80s, there was also this like the end of the Cold War, I guess, technically Soviet War, whatever, and we're supposed to be entering there was like this belief that there was going to be no more need for militaries. Is that correct, or were you not really experiencing that?
I was experiencing the first part of what you said somewhat.
Okay.
The fact that we didn't need militaries any longer never crossed my mind, and I'd never heard of that before.
Okay.
But wanting to travel, that's part of adventure, yeah. And you know, I'm one of these people who I could entertain myself by, I mean, if you put a map on the wall, one of those wall maps, I could literally entertain myself for 4 or 5 hours straight and just sit there and look at the map and study it. And
Right.
look at the oceans, look at the capitals, think about history and how Caesar and Napoleon, where they went, where their routes were. I could just, rivers and mountains, I could just look at a map for 5 hours and keep myself entertained. So
Right. Yeah.
that kind of leads to a love for travel, and that kind of leads into adventure. So that it's all kind of it's all mixed together to me.
And that was 85 that you were enlisted, 85, 86?
85 to 89,
Or 80,
4 years.
85 to 89.
Yeah.
And then how did that work, the progression over to the commission side?
Well, so after 4 years, I was in Korea. I was stationed up at the truce village of Panmunjom in the United Nations Command Joint Security Force. And the first sergeant kept asking me, "It's time for you to go to PLDC, and you know, we want you in the next class." And I said, "Well, you know, I don't know, first sergeant." I don't know, in my mind, I didn't have any master plan, but I kept rejecting it. And I think there must have been something bigger involved in my life that kind of helped me kept rejecting that. And then one day I was walking back from the mess hall, and I was walking past this, I don't know, E5 or E6, having a discussion with a group of his friends, and he was telling everybody how he was going to get out and use his GI Bill and go to university. And I wasn't even part of that group, but as I walked by very slowly, I heard that, and it's amazing how something like that can just change the whole nexus.
Yeah, the whole dynamic of
of the rest of your life. And so something like that just clicked with me. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to do. So
you actually got out. I'm assuming in 89 there wasn't those programs like Green to Gold.
No, I didn't do Green to Gold. I didn't do any of that. I flat got out of the military.
Okay.
And went back to my home state and town, used my GI Bill, and I also had the college fund, so I got those two combined. And I was setting out on getting being a history major, and I was gonna teach school.
That's what I was gonna ask, is what you went to school for. Was it ultimately, I think at least in today's time, for somebody to go Green to Gold, or to somebody to try to go from the enlisted side to the commission side, they're just out to get whatever degree. It really doesn't matter. They're just like, I just want to get this done so I can get over to the commission side and start making more money, which is obviously the wrong approach to take to it all anyways, because you should be broadening your knowledge and your experience and whatnot, and you should be wanting to learn and acquire this skill and pose yourself for the next chapter of your life or whatever. So you have a fallback plan now, even once you're done being an officer. Well, now you can go teach history, right? So that's pretty cool. I don't want to take up too much, but yeah, that's super cool. I'm always interested. I wanted to do Green to Gold very badly, and I never did. And it's something that I always talked about, and I just never ended up doing it. And then by the time, it was time that I could do it, I'd have to get a waiver for everything: time and service waiver, age waiver, dependence waiver, background waiver. Like, it was everything. So I was like, I'll just stay on the enlisted progression, I guess, now. And then that PLDC that you were mentioning, that's what would become WLC, or now
exactly BLC. Yes.
Okay.
And this is what I see from my worldview, is this is God's hand at work, because
for
I
career.
had been going to university, working towards my teacher's certificate for 2 years. And in retrospect, there is no way I ever would have survived in public school education. I'm too independent. I push the envelope, and I have ideals and worldviews that don't line up with. I didn't see it this way when I was 18 or 19 when I was thinking it. But looking back, I'm almost sure I would have gotten myself embroiled in some sort of trouble in the public school system. I mean,
Now,
especially these days, I would be gone in a heartbeat and canceled. So
when you say public school system, you mean like a public university, right? Not a private university. You're not talking about middle school.
no, yeah,
high
I mean,
school.
I could have absolutely taught at parochial school. I mean, that would have been a good.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
experiencing the same thing right now. So I just medically retired back in July. I go to school mostly online, but I do go to school, in person, a couple times a week. And yeah, it's different. It's different. And like the gradings is all from biases, and nobody's really teaching you anything. You know what I mean? You're really just figuring everything out for yourself. And I'm just like, man, I can't believe they charge what they charge nowadays either, too, because everything is available to you. Everything that they're going to tell you is at your fingertips. So,
But even so, yeah, now like these days, there's a lot like that whole thing with bias is big in public school. But I I've we've talked some, Devin, about spirituality and religious belief, and what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you were put in a position where you had to be a public school teacher, especially as we're going into the 90s and then into the aughts, there was essentially an activist group in the country, I think more than one, that was really pushing the whole separation of church and state. And when you're trying to teach people, like, your worldview, all that stuff's connected. And so to try and divorce that, if that's the perspective that you see in the world, just to not offend somebody that's like way too easy to offend, is that kind of what you mean? As like, if you were trying to teach and be candid, and like, it's always, everything that you say is from your perspective. I don't believe in this whole oh, you can have this unbiased person that's above it all, and like a news source or something. It's like, oh, what, fair and balanced? It's like, no, that's not how people work. We all have a perspective. And so it's like, if you have a traditional religious perspective, you're supposed to actively suppress that in the public school system, which I get the argument for. And like, I'm not traditionally religious, so I feel like I'm in a good place to say, I don't know if that really works. I don't know if that really works. And in growing up, I wasn't traditionally religious either. And I remember having experiences where teachers would, especially in science classes, if they were traditionally religious, would say some things like, and some people, say the Big Bang, and like, kind of roll their eyes. And I kind of remember being a little butthurt about that because I wasn't traditionally religious. But it's like, what I should have done is just get over it, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm saying
everybody's got
is
their biases.
I'm not saying that anybody should be in there to proselytize in the public school system, but for your viewers, I would challenge your viewers, and maybe both of you, if you haven't. There's a really excellent movie which kind of sums us all up, and it's called God's Not Dead 2. So there was an original God's Not Dead movie,
That was a good movie.
Yeah, which is a good movie. But actually, most times the sequels or the second and third movie are somewhat lesser good, or not as good. But this is one of those ones where the second one is the best of the whole series. God's Not Dead 2. And it has to do with this school teacher in the classroom. And she refers to Jesus Christ as a historical figure, and she's only talking about the historical sense. And she's canceled, and then she's fired from school, and the union comes against her, and then there's this big courtroom battle, and I know some people think that these Christian movies are kind of third rate, they really suck, and they're not very entertaining. This one is highly entertaining, and it's really poignant. So if you get it, I would challenge both of you and the listeners, if you haven't seen it, to go see God's Not Dead 2. It's really, it really kind of captures the whole thing.
Yeah, I'll definitely look it up. Do you know if it's available on any streaming services?
I'm not sure. I don't see why it wouldn't be, but I know you can go down. Anybody in their own public library, because the public libraries have DVDs in their system, so you can definitely go down to the public library and request it as a DVD. I know that for sure.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. Looks like. So,
Yeah.
oh, it's not available in my country, but there's ways around that. There's ways around that I won't get into here. Yeah, no, I'll definitely check that out.
So we can definitely say that you are a man of faith. Is that fair? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
for sure.
Awesome. Okay. Good. I am as well. I didn't always start off that way. I like my grandma was very Christian, but not one to like force it down people's throats. It was just she was the kind of person that if you're ever sick or if you're ever having bad dreams, she would make the comment of, well, you just have to ask God to make you better, or ask God to not have you or help you not have bad dreams, but never really want to be citing scripture at you or anything else like that. And then obviously I've gone to church with her a couple times, and then at some point I rejected all of it through a different, maybe not rejected it, but I guess interpreted it differently. Maybe you could say I fell on the Ancient Aliens kick for a little bit, and then because it kind of made sense, but then the more that I experience the world and have gone through like the nonsense that we have been going through ever since, I don't know, I think 2012 was a transitioning point, and I definitely think 2020 was a transitioning point, and it's almost like there was like this spiritual awakening, if that makes sense, where it was just like an aha moment, where it's just like I've never been closer to faith or a God or a creator or a whatever. So, and it's just crazy that something like 2020 or something like that, or like a life altering experience, can just completely change your worldview on everything.
Absolutely.
So that was a little side rant, but I wanted to let you know, I'm here with you. I'm a man of faith as well. Do you think that influenced your? Were you always like that?
Always, yes. I mean,
Okay.
I've just become more learned and more knowledgeable, more well-spoken, more logical.
Yeah.
In my thinking, because I think faith and logic kind of go side by side. I mean,
Absolutely.
I've arrived at a reasoned faith. I don't take anything on blind faith. So
right.
I've had some really, really tough questions and some really things I wanted answers to, and I really, really went looking, and I found all the answers and that I was looking for, and they were really tough questions too.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I've been down just a side note, like studying the Bible and studying ancient religions, like multitudes of ancient religions or old scripts and whatnot. And I think really you need to look at them all to be able to view like what's missing out of each one, and kind of be able to put like a better, I think the Bible is number one, but I really think that the other ones are, give you a lot of insight as to stuff that's been removed from the Bible, maybe, if that makes sense. Because obviously there's like lost books of the Bible or removed books of the Bible and stuff like that are, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I feel you in that aspect. I love going off and researching and looking for answers. And I guess you could say I'm an idealist or a philosopher, I guess. I question why about everything. Literally everything. I want to know the inner workings behind it. I want to know what's driving it. I want to know what's resulting from it. And I really think why is probably the best question anybody could ask to anything. And the Army especially hates that. And there was even a popular paper that came out. I can't even remember who wrote it, but it was talking about Generation Y, right? About how soldiers that have come in since maybe like, 2008, 2010, before then, your leader could tell you something stupid to do, say, hey, take this lighter and go bury it in a hole, and you just didn't ask questions. And then there was a period where that same NCO tells a new soldier that came in a little bit later, go bury this lighter for no reason, and the soldier asks why. That's just an example, and I don't remember the exact one in it, but the bottom driving to the paper was soldiers shouldn't be asking why, and soldiers should just be shutting up and doing what they're told to do. And I don't really see that as like any correct way to lead. I'm assuming you, as a like a man of faith and a leader of moral character, and you seeing this calling, I'm assuming that you would agree.
Yeah, I think you're on the right road, Rodney. I
Okay.
agree with
Okay.
with much of what you say.
Okay.
So yeah, on that note, having this, spiritual position, being a man of faith, what I'm most curious about is how that interacted with your experience in the Army and your development as a leader.
As a leader, yeah.
And what, maybe if you could just provide us with a couple anecdotes from your career that were particularly salient, of where, spirituality and your faith played a role and helped you be, the best leader that you could be, or any special insights that you gain from having that perspective throughout your career.
Well, so all those leadership insights that you hear, that you read about in the books and that you get taught in school, all those apply. So the canned stuff is true and it works. Lead from the front, the golden rule, all those things are characteristics of good leadership. But at least part of it, some parts of leadership can be learned, but other parts are God-given. And then there's also one more part. So I think it kind of comes in three prongs. One is kind of what you're innately given by God. The other one is what you learn in the classroom or along the way in experience.
Yep.
But the other one is how you were raised and your upbringing. So how you're raised and your upbringing puts a stamp upon you as a toddler, or as a up until you're a 10, and then when you're a teenager, what you see your parents doing, what your life experiences are up to that point, what your faith foundation is, all that makes a difference, and it all kind of flows into the leader that you're going to be. So I think it's all three things combined, or the recipe about how any leader comes out to execute their leadership style. My personal recipe is you got to know your people, and I know that goes back to the fundamentals, but I'm talking about I always liked going down to the motor pool and or elsewhere, to the shops or to the squads, and I like shooting the shit with the private and the PFC and the specialist, and I actually enjoyed, not because I had to, but I actually enjoyed exchanging stories and backgrounds about where they were from, diving skin deep about what they believed. We didn't get too far down the road unless we were doing some one-on-one, but what was going on in their lives, where they traveled to, if we had past duty stations together, we could talk about those. And a lot of times there was a lot of overlap. And then just by virtue of doing that, you're creating a connection at the absolute lowest level. But then you just do that with all ranks. And, pretty soon you know all the stories of private so-and-so, PFC so-and-so, specialist so-and-so, sergeant so-and-so, staff sergeant so-and-so, your platoon sergeant. And so you not only know what you know in the office, but you know where they come from, what state they're from, where they're coming from mentally, where they were educated, what their past duty stations and experiences are. And it's two ways. So you're learning that for yourself, but guess what? They're learning about you too.
Right.
And you're opening up a door into their heart and into their mind. And now it's like a handshake. You're handshaking with them, but they're handshaking back. And so you develop that rapport,
right,
with everybody up and down the line. And so I think that's a start.
And
and
soldiers
it's a really
see,
long one.
soldiers see that too, you know, and especially privates, you know, especially brand new privates, they're scared of everybody, you know, and I'll say anybody, you know, like I'll say everybody under the rank of sergeant probably doesn't like talking to the captain, the major, you know, tenses up when they come around. But by showing that, it's showing like, hey, I'm not just a rank, I'm a person, I'm your mentor, and I'm your leader, but I also care. You know what I mean? And I want to show you guys that, you know, I'm not just this indoctrinated robot that's here to just hem you up all the time, but I'm here to establish a relationship with all of you so we can be the closest knit group that we possibly can be.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think this is a God-given ability with for myself. I'm not bragging or anything, but I mean, I always had a genuine interest and ability just to connect with anybody at where they're at and
right
at their level, and just you just got to find the common ground. I mean, I've met people who are just so aloof or just in an ivory tower, and they're hard to communicate, and they've got no personality, and it's those are just the worst commanders. I had a really good run on people who I worked for who were senior in rank to me, but there was one or two, and at least one of these guys was a 1-star general, and just had absolutely no personality, and I could not connect with that person. I had interaction with that person, but there was no give and take. It was like, geez, is this guy like a cyborg or something? You know, it's
right
just like I got to connect with people on a certain level, and I just couldn't connect with them.
yeah
But yeah,
I think this idea that those kind of interactions, like, first of all, what you just said, that it's a skill, I think that that's missed. And since it's missed, the Army looks at it and they go, hey, not everybody's doing this. And then what they try and do is they say, hey,
you're
we got a
hugging
solution.
Joe. You're a Joe hugger if you do this.
We've got we've got an institutional solution. You know, behavioral health in the chaplain corps.
Okay, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
I see
so
where you're going.
instead of empowering and encouraging leaders to expand those innate talents, and then calling people that don't have that skill out for what it is, it's like, look, you don't got it.
Yeah.
You know, it's an essential leadership attribute that some people don't have, and they're not going to be as good. This idea that everybody can be good with the amount of training and there's no innate differences in ability, I just don't think that's a reality. And that egalitarian mindset sets it up so it's like, no, everybody can do it, and if somebody doesn't have that interpersonal ability, well, it's just a matter of training. And oh, well, actually, that's obviously not true. So what we'll do is we'll create these subject matter experts that we can then pawn off the responsibility for generating this social cohesion on in the chaplain corps and behavioral health. But that doesn't work because
nobody wants to go see them. Nobody wants to go see them. Joe's
look,
lower enlisted. Look, we are, at least in the infantry side, I can't speak on everybody, but it is a sign of weakness to go to EBH or to go speak to the chaplain, or people don't want to come to their leader and say, hey, can I speak to the chaplain? Not every soldier knows how to get a hold of them. I mean, they're supposed to, and I'm sure it's advertised enough that they should have known by now, but like people view it as like a sign of weakness, I guess. Like, hey, maybe I'm not headstrong like the rest of these guys, or why is this bothering me so much, but it doesn't seem to be bothering anybody else. And I think, whereas if your leader knew how to assess you and deal with you, then your soldier is going to be more likely to come to the leader than it is going to be to go to the chaplain. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
And you're not coming around. You're not coming around because they need treatment. You're coming around to build a relationship,
right.
Because you're their leader, and it's a bi-directional thing. And I got to imagine that Colonel NuDelman coming around and talking with those junior soldiers, like, not only is that establishing that relationship, but it's leading from the front and showing that example to all those officers and NCOs in between, like, hey, this is something that I expect you to do. It's like, if I can make time to do it, then you can make time to do it, and look at the results, instead of this top down. I won't be vague about it. I'll be really explicit as an example of the exact opposite, as we have right now these golden triangle calls. So these golden triangle calls are, leaders are required to call the next of kin of each of their soldiers, right? But everybody knows that it's a requirement coming from the top down. So, if Colonel NuDelman comes down and does that and nobody else is saying to do it, and it's not being directed, that is a demonstration that he cares. It's like, hey, you're doing a great job. I want to, like, can I call you next to, like, you got a mom or dad,
oh, in that case,
wife
yeah.
that I could call. I want to let them know what a great job you're doing. That's like, wow, like this person cares that much. That's incredible. And that builds that connection. It does the exact opposite when that soldier knows that it's just a check the block requirement.
But at the same
that's
time,
kind of what I'm speaking about.
Yeah. At the same time, touching on what you just said about the check the box requirement, and I'm sure it wasn't the case with you, Devon. But if you're that BC or that commander, whatever, that everybody just dislikes and doesn't respect, every time you come around, people are like, oh my gosh, man, like, yep, here comes the BC again, coming to. So it has to be from a place of genuineness, you know what I mean? And not because well, I better go make my rounds today, or I better go see what the guys are up to, or I know that I'm supposed to show face at least once in the barracks, or whatever. It's a matter of doing it because you actually care and you want to do it. But if you're just that VIP that's showing up just because you're a VIP and you're like, oh yeah, let me, at least from the enlisted side, right? Perfect.
No, you're exactly correct. Whether it's enlisted or officer, if you're a faker, the soldiers are in a heartbeat. They're going to recognize your fakeness in a heartbeat. They can pick up on that, and not only that, but they're not going to have a lot of confidence in you. So when they have those gripes or concerns, they're going to take them to other places,
right?
Instead of the chain of command. So they're going to go off and run off to the IG, or they're going to go run off and file some other sort of complaint, or go see the chaplain or something like that. And so,
right.
If you're a faker, yeah, they're going to pick up on that, and you're not going to build that trust in the chain of command. So
you ever just have that awkward person that just comes around and you just know that they're just, not genuine, they're just a faker. They're just, they're just not an upfront, honest person or whatever. You can just tell. You're like, oh, here comes that person coming around again. But real quick, touching on what you had said, and then I'll pass it over to Grant, because I know he actually has some other questions. You had mentioned this innate ability, this innate leadership ability, and this nurture versus nature ability, and this this learned ability to lead, and how it's kind of, you know, triple faceted, I guess, or multifaceted. And I just think that that's amazing coming from, you know, an 06 with, you know, how long, 33 years of military leadership, you know, experience, and then whatever leadership experience after that. And that's literally the first episode that we had, right, Grant? We talked about, you know, are you just born with it? Is it, you know, is it nature versus nurture? Is it just, because I had mentioned, you know, because I was the same way, and I even posed it the same way. I was like, I don't want to brag, but I feel like I always had this natural ability. Now, that isn't to say that people can't learn to lead, but I think in order to be that well-rounded leader, it's something that you really need to be born with, something that you really need to have had either through really bad experiences where you learned like what not to do and what wrong is, and you know, how to, you know, go right from there, or you just had a really good example of, you know, sound moral principles and character and whatnot growing up for the nature versus nurture aspect, you know, and then the on the job training, all the other little stuff that shows you kind of how to do a job, but not necessarily how to lead, if that makes sense. And I really think that there are big differences between each individual one and like the combination of all of them. So I really wanted to point that out, because that was our first episode that we had posted.
Interesting.
So, but yeah, Grant.
Yeah, well, I mean, you came in under the Reagan administration. Cold War is still ongoing. It's the tail end of the Cold War. End up transitioning, going the officer route. You know, we have all these presidential administrations, all of these things that happen culturally in the country. And then, you know, Panama, Gulf War I, you know, global war on terror. You know, you went through all of that. What I really want to talk about and hear your perspectives on is the socio-political changes in culture in the Army. Because there's aspects of Army culture that I read old stuff and I see that there's some things that are the same, some problems and challenges that have been around as long as the organization's been around. Especially the parallels between the Vietnam War and the global war on terror. But yeah, just can you speak on that? Just from when you first came in, like what the culture was like and how it related to the nation at large. And then, you know, by the time that you got out and even current day, your perspective.
Yeah. So I've seen quite a bit of change, and instead of evolution, I've seen basically a devolution of our military since 1985.
Is it? Do you think it's intentional?
Intentional if something's intentional, there's a mind behind it.
Is somebody deliberately trying to weaken the United States
I think
military?
I think there is a groups of minds behind it, and there are cultural and spiritual influences that are behind this. I don't think there's one mind behind all this. Yeah.
Right.
So I would say it's less single mind intentional as opposed to cultural influences that are happening, that are affecting the military, which are driving the devolution.
Right.
So
could you give some examples of maybe some drastic changes that you had seen where you're just like, what is going on in the Army right now?
So when I came in 1985, we were focused solely on war fighting.
Mm-hmm.
The internet age has something to do with what I'm talking about. Not totally, but I mean, we didn't have mandatory training back then.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
we had one that I remember, and that was the SAIDA briefing, which was subversion and espionage directed against the United States. The only briefing that we had in my whole first 4 years was the SAIDA briefing.
And for the viewers that don't know, that's probably how to identify insider threats.
Yes.
Right? Okay. All right.
We didn't have any of the online, and then as the years went by, which I'm sure Grant still has to deal with, is you just have mandatory training piled on one after another, and it just eats away at your time, and it's just so burdensome, and it's frustrating because these are yearly mandatory trainings that are somewhat culturally influenced, and you got to go in and you got to take it every single year. And you're thinking to yourself, why do I have to take this? Okay, one time I understand.
Multiple times a year in some cases.
Once a year, every year, and you're like, okay, I know this stuff by heart. Yeah. Why am I being repeatedly bombarded with this every single year?
Nobody takes it seriously anyways. People cheat all those tests. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody has ever really taken any of the online nonsense that has just been fire hosed at us. Seriously.
You say they cheat the test, and that's a really important point. So like all this annual training requirement, if you're listening to this, just look up Lying to Ourselves by Wong and Garris, who wrote it. I think at the War College, they wrote up a paper that covered exactly this issue that they published in 2015. They did analysis, and it showed that the 350-1 training actually took more than a year to do all of it.
Yeah.
The annual training requirements, it takes more than a year just for those, not to mention all the actual training and warfighting that you're supposed to do. And so, like Rodney said, it creates this situation where everybody is just cheating the test and not taking it seriously. Well, what does that do to your character?
Yeah, now you're lacking in integrity.
Some percentage of what you have to do in the Army in order to get stuff done is you have to lie. And people will say, and
what's the Army's motto?
They'll say,
if you ain't cheating,
oh,
you ain't trying.
Yeah, they'll say I've never lied, and you just press just a little bit, and they did that with those interviews, and they found that people will be like, oh yeah, actually we do lie all the time, because they get numb to it, they can't even tell.
Yeah.
So,
well, the Army also has that. Oh, sorry. There's also the saying in the Army. It's a very, very popular one. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And then there's also the case of there's only one thief in the Army. Everybody else is just trying to get their shit back. So that's more on gear, but there is a level of dishonesty in it, and some of it's out of fear, like, you're going to get hemmed up if you don't have something. And of course, people are never taking the amount of crazy motor pool operations that goes on when there's like some layout that's about to happen is just insane. That's but some sidetracks. But I mean, what it has caused is like this ingenuity to cheat the system. I really think that because nobody's really going out and training, having fun in the field, getting to know each other. Now it's, how do we get this stuff done as fast as possible so we can go home today? That's really what I think it kind of morphed into. So when you came in, they were focused on war fighting, and there was only one online or one course for you to take, and it was mostly on insider threats and espionage. And then
and so then there's lots of other factors which I think have led to the devolution of the military. So this is a smaller one, but when I came in, we didn't have any of these. I mean, they may have existed on the outside, but I don't remember ever attending a history month for any particular ethnicity whatsoever.
Right.
I don't remember being advertised. I never went to one, never even heard of one. And I don't have a problem with any of these ethnicities, but I think it creates division. You know, when I went back in the early 90s, I heard lots of gripes from people whose month wasn't recognized.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, what about the German American month or the Russian
Right.
American month or the Irish American month or the English American month? You know,
So you're
when
saying
you
even
when you pick and choose which ethnicities you're going to recognize in any particular month, and you only got 12 months,
right.
somebody's going to get left out. Not only somebody, but there's lots of groups that are going to be left out. And so you have people thinking, well, hell, well, what about my group?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and that's the exact opposite mentality that the Army was supposed to engender, where we're on one team, and like those differences and those group identities you can use them to connect with people, but what's the thing that we should be focusing on the Army? Probably those things that we all share, like the fact that we're all soldiers, the fact that we're all Americans.
Exactly. I just think it creates division, and whether it's overt or whether it's internalized and you're just thinking it to yourself, you're still thinking it to yourself.
So you're saying you didn't notice this both in or outside the Army up until like a certain year or whatever. Like you came back in and that's when you notice, you're like, holy smokes, you know, what is this? That's kind of
it just became more prevalent. I never heard of it for the first 4 years. Went back in and I heard about it once in a while in the 90s. And then in the 2000s, you know, was posters were everywhere. Started getting emails. Then it was these are like command performance. You better show up. If you're not there, you're marginalized, kind of thing. And it's like, geez, I mean, really.
Sorry. So you're noticing it because I've always had a question. I've always had two questions, really. Is the military the testing grounds for stuff that they're trying to introduce to society, or is the military weakening because of the weaker society that is trickling in, right? And in the Army is where I always noticed this sexual harassment, sexual assault, equal opportunity, so on and so forth, posters everywhere about everything that could ever go wrong and how you could be wronged and who to contact if you're wronged. And now, like, I go into my daughter's school and there's signs posted up that say Eagle 6, and I'm like, I instantly don't like that because it's a school off post. Eagle 6 is the screaming eagle commander, you know what I mean? And everybody's just viewing it like it's because the school is called the Eagles. No, and even if it was the case, right? They're making it a point to militarize the schools or set them up in a similar way to what common areas would be like on base, if that makes sense. How if you go into the common areas in the barracks, that's where you're going to see all these signs and phone numbers and names of faces and names of who to go talk to. And then I'm ultimately seeing it in the school environments as well, very, very reminiscent of what I'm seeing on base. And in my mind, I'm like, damn, they're really trying to, they're trying to pump the same agenda that's happening on base to the students that are outside of base. But at the same time, I've always conflicted myself, or I've always gone back and forth on if we're doing all of this stuff because of the type of society that was trickling in, was there a less or a more mentally weak society that was trickling in, that was offended by everything, and now all of a sudden we start doing this? Or did the military start doing this first and then introduce it into society? If that
does that, it's the classic chicken or the chicken or the egg, right? First,
right?
No.
But I brought it up because you said that you hadn't even noticed that in the civilian world about this, certain months or whatever, and then you.
Well, I'm telling you, I work in the civilian world right now.
Yeah.
yes, and and I've been in the workforce for a couple of years, and I tell you what, I've gone through the whole couple 12-month periods already, and I've heard neither hide nor hair of any such and such observance month at the workplace.
Oh,
Zero.
so okay. So
Because
civilian
I'm
world
guessing
doesn't
that
care.
they know it creates division, and that
Okay.
they're not going to go there.
Right.
So,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, my take on all this stuff is that institutions are targets of activists. So if you work for a private company, so like the really large companies, the multinationals, like those are institutions, but the more concentrated the power, the more attractive it is as a target for activists that
right,
have an
Grant.
agenda.
You're exactly correct.
And so, in the army, the military is a great target. And what I think a lot of leaders don't understand is they don't understand the objective of the activists. So they'll see this stuff that is designed to sound good and be non-controversial at first glance, like an appreciation month, right? What's wrong with appreciation?
Yeah.
But
On the
like
surface,
Devon
you wouldn't
said,
think it would be
yeah,
harmless, right? But
yeah, but
at
there's
the
going to
end,
be people not included,
yes.
but even
Oh.
more insidious than that, that's not the point that's being advanced by the activists. So like the activists that are the reason that these things are getting implemented, their position comes from a place where they view American society and the entire Western civilization as oppressive. And
Yeah,
that
they're trying to disrupt it. Yeah.
systematic or systemic oppression, and that
Mhm.
your status as oppressor or oppressee, perpetrator or victim, has to do with innate characteristics that you don't have any control over. The color of your skin, what's between your legs. Like those are the things that determine your character. And it's an inversion of the truth, because really character has to do with choice and free will. It has to do with what you have control over. And what makes you virtuous is doing the right thing. And if you don't have, if they're setting in the frame, if the whole entire frame is that there's nothing that you can do because of the color of your skin, like that's where they're coming from. And that's why I think that it is so divisive, because they're intending to, the activists are intending for it to be divisive, while everybody else is looking on thinking, well, what's the big deal? Like diversity is good, inclusion's good. And it's like, that's not what they're trying to do. But it's complicated. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, is to talk about these things, because I don't think a lot of leaders, I don't think they're concerned about this kind of thing. And there's a lot of senior folks that if I think this was explained to them, they'd be like, wow, there's, like nobody wants their troops to be divided.
Nobody wants to talk
their
about the uncomfortable facts, So there's four more things that before we move on to the next topic, that that kind of that kind of support the thesis here. And that's, in the 1990s, you had don't ask, don't tell.
Yep.
And
that was a huge change.
Yeah, that was a huge change. And
then
it's
something I don't even think about. Yeah, I forgot all about it. Yeah.
And then in the 2000s, they got rid of don't ask, don't tell. And then that's when General Mixon, the USAPAC commanders, spoke up. And General Peter Pace, who was the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke up. And they got canceled and fired and retired. And, and then you had President Obama allowing transgenders in the military, experimenting. Again, we're talking about experimentation in the military, and that does not lead to readiness. That leads to unreadiness.
Right.
And then now you have the Air Force discouraging the use of gender pronouns in conducting their written business, and you have the Marine Corps dropping references to ma'am and sir for drill instructors. I mean, all of these things are not leading to better readiness or better warfighting. They're distractions. Let me tell you one more thing that most people don't know, that's quite shocking. And I'm surprised more people don't complain about this. And And that's the fact in the promotion system. In the promotion system, I've known people who sat on promotion boards, several. And this is the process. If you're up for promotion, whether it be to captain or major or lieutenant colonel or full colonel or whatever.
Sergeant first class, I'm assuming. Yeah. Okay.
And it's a centralized board.
Yep.
The board's going to meet, and the board has quotas and percentages and targets that they're after for certain races and sexes.
Yep.
So let's pretend that we're at the cut line here. So can everybody envision what a cut line is? It's the people who make the promotion or above the cut line, the people who don't make the promotion or below the cut line.
Yeah,
okay.
There's a score, right? There's an aggregate score that everybody's file gets.
So if you're well above the cut line, you're safe. If you're well below the cut line, you're not going to get promoted. Okay, those are easy ones. Now let's get really close to the cut line.
Right.
Okay. After all the voting happens at the centralized board, and if you're just creeped above the cut line for at least 30 minutes or an hour, you're going to get promoted. But you're not, because there are people who are also just below the cut line, okay, who don't make it. The board, because of the list that they came up with after voting, does not meet the right number of females or the right number of races. They automatically go back and they bring some of the people who were just below the cut line, who were not going to get promoted, and bring them above the cut line. And some of the people who were just above the cut line, if they were males or they weren't the right race, they come below the cut line.
Yeah.
Okay. And lo and behold, you were good enough to get promoted, but now you're not, because you weren't the right gender or the right race.
Right.
And when these promotion boards get announced, sometimes and very often, especially in the 2000s, some of us would look around after the promotion list come out at midnight on Friday, and everybody's looking at it themselves the very next Monday and saying, how the heck did so-and-so get promoted before so-and-so?
Right.
How is that possible? And then when you think about it and how these boards happen, it's like, okay, now I understand it. I mean, I don't agree with it whatsoever, but Joe Schmo must have been dropped out of below the cut line, and Mrs. So-and-so must have been brought above the cut line, and that's how this happened. And I'm just using hypotheticals. I'm not saying it's always a female or a certain race, but I'm just saying this is not a merit. This is not a merit system, and this is unfair. The reason why it's hard to be challenged is because it's not in the public domain. The deliberations of the board are secret and sensitive and locked up. They are never published, and they're not allowed to be accessed through FOIA. And so these kinds of results are very, very hard to be challenged. But if people knew, there would be such an outcry, and they would be outraged.
Well, not only that, but if anybody were to challenge it, they would be painted as a racist.
Yes.
That's just the world that we're living in today. If you point out the fact that there are any sort of incentivized systems by colleges, universities, employments, whatever, where where they are selecting just because they feel that they need to meet a quota because of certain races or genders, then you are now defeating the purpose of the whole thing, right? It's supposed to be, hey, just hire people. It doesn't matter what race, gender, whatever. But once you start making these quotas and whatnot, now you're intentionally dropping some races and genders off to select others just because you have to meet your quota. And that's messed up. But
so I've heard that this happens, but nobody's ever laid it out explicitly saying, hey, I know people secondhand that have been on the boards, and this is what happens. What we're talking about essentially is just, it's affirmative action, right? So
They
everybody knows
released a
what
letter
affirmative action
too.
is.
They released a
Yeah.
letter after the end of the centralized board, and I think race and gender are in there, along with like, they talk about so and or X number out of X number had an
Yeah, but
EID,
that's supposedly just
yeah, it's just
demographic
stats.
information.
Yep,
It's just
it's
supposed
just
to be
supposed to be
That's
stats,
and
not.
that's somewhat different. That's the demographic results of what actually happened in the end.
right.
But
Yeah,
it's not a
not.
representation
Yeah.
of what happened in the middle of the process. I
Right.
really, really wish somebody somewhere who got whiff that they've been screwed would file a court case, and it would get to the Supreme Court
To
for
get
these
a
Yeah,
subpoena.
well,
folks, because
from what I understand is the Supreme Court not in the middle of considering affirmative action right
Oh,
now?
that
they are for the Harvard case.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think based on the results of that case, if they determine that that's unconstitutional, then I think that would be a really good opportunity to uh, try and question that practice in the military. Because if as you get more senior, everybody ends up, like, a lot of people end up on promotion boards. If you don't end up on one, you're going to have close friends that are. And so if everybody that's senior knows that this is what's going on, and a lot of junior people infer it based on, like you said, Devon, like the results, and because a lot of our performance is it's objectified. We have evaluations where they try and make everything objective, so it's really easy to compare between officers, and like that system of coming up with an objective score saying, hey, this person's the top 10% of officers that I work with, etc., getting that top block, all those things don't necessarily correspond to the overall quality and capability of an officer or NCO. But nevertheless, we have the scores. And so when people get promoted over people where those things don't line up, it's pretty obvious. And then when that happens, Thomas Sowell is probably like the best source on this topic of the results of affirmative action policies and the social problems that they create. The quintessential example that he uses is with college admissions, where you have very, very bright African American students that nevertheless get mismatched with like very elite schools, like that are at just a level too high. Like, so folks that say score higher than in the top 10% on the SAT, but then they get paired with people that score in the top 1%, and then they don't do as well because it's more challenging than what the admission requirement was for everybody else. So that mismatch causes people to not do well, whereas they would have done really, really well if that finger wasn't being put on the scale. And I imagine it's probably similar in the military, because we're always judging each other on competence, especially when we got to work as a team. So it creates a lot of problems, I think, and there's a lot of negative second and third order effects, and I think it's flagrantly unconstitutional in any case.
Absolutely. So just 2 points. One thing is it's more routine than you think it is. This happens virtually every single board. It's not just here and there. The second thing is what is the end result? The end result is we're not picking and promoting the best people based on merit. And so what does this mean? It means that we're less ready, and we don't have our best people leading us into the next war or defending our country. So it could end up will end up being a catastrophic result.
Yeah, and if your primary objective is to dismantle systemic oppression, then you're willing to sacrifice some military readiness, right, in order to get that objective. And there are people for whom that is their number one objective. because they see systemic oppression as the number one threat. I mean, we don't have to speculate. We had talked previously about the extremism stand down, where they're like, this is the number one threat to readiness in the military. And as a physical therapist, I'm like, what about back pain?
That was
Look at it
absolutely that
look
was
at it like this,
absolutely
Grant.
ridiculous when they did that. That was insane. I was offended when they did that. And I don't get offended, but when they did that extremism stand down thing, which if I remember correctly, it was following January 6th, right? It was following the January 6th event, and then the entire army had to do a stand down. I'm just letting the viewers know. The entire army had to do a stand down where the leaders had to give classes. So I got this printout and I'm reading through the classes, and I have to read these what are they called? Snippets or vignettes. And everything was white people. Everything was white radicals, white supremacists, like everything. And I was like, there's a lot more extremism going on right now than just from white people. You know what I mean? And it really it upset me because I'm like, we're not being fair towards addressing extremism. We're only addressing white people. That's what it was. And it was right when Biden took office. I'm like, dude, this is ridiculous, man. This is how this next 4 years is going to go, So I don't know. That's just a side rant. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate having to be the leader that sits there and reads to all of my soldiers about how they're all evil whiteys, pretty much. I didn't appreciate it at all. So especially when there was stuff and it was only addressing like the KKK and white supremacy. And I'm like, well, what's going on? We just witnessed Antifa last year, BLM last year, like all this crazy stuff within the last 2 years. Why are we not talking about this? Because I don't want to talk about it, because those are different groups, and they're not trying to bastardize those groups currently like they're trying to bastardize anybody that's white, male, or whatever. So I don't know.
Doesn't raise critical consciousness.
It doesn't.
Devin, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to make one comment, follow up on yours. So about if your goal is to fight oppression or to raise up certain classes, well, okay, well, that's all well and good. I mean, but I don't agree with that. But if you don't have a country,
right?
if you lose your country, and if you lose your autonomy, then the goal that you mentioned or that these people want is going to be a non-starter anyway, because you don't have a country. So what's the first order of business? The first order of business is you got to have a country.
Well, I don't think that that set of beliefs doesn't really come with a desire for a multipolar world with national sovereignty. It's more of an international order.
I understand what you're saying.
One world government.
Yeah, they don't care about America.
Agree.
Yeah.
But one thing I'll add to the extremism thing is, just because it's a funny anecdote, is I have a colleague who's a captain and was in one of those trainings, and it was online, being provided online. And they brought up, I think they said saying white lives matter. No, not even that. They said saying all lives matter was an example of hate speech. And so he spoke up and was like, I don't see, I mean, if that is, then, Black Lives Matter is. That's not consistent. And the person that was presenting it was like, well, I can tell you, that, it's an indication of white privilege, and you don't, if you had the lived experience. And he's like, let him finish. And he's like, well, as I know you can't see me because I'm on video, but as another expert in being Black in America, and just, so
that's funny.
And everybody gets a good laugh out of it. But some of the leaders were like, oh, shut up, shut up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's just absurd. But it's not absurd if you understand the objectives and what it's about. But everybody else is just kind of confused, and that confusion God, it has second and third order effects that I think people aren't taking as seriously as they should.
I can't
but yeah,
believe people fall for it all so easily. Honestly, I'm like, how are people falling
well,
for?
I think it goes back to that ethical numbing where it's like
Yeah.
we're used to doing stuff that's BS and check
Yeah.
the block. So what's another BS check the block training? What's
Right.
different about it?
Right.
You know, why are you complaining?
No, I even mean from just like a Western society aspect, or people that watch the news or listen to all the agendas that they throw at us all the time.
Well, it's not. I don't. It's
people
not
fall
popular.
into the trap so easy.
It's not popular. It's like Devon said. If everybody knew,
Yeah.
there would be an uproar because affirmative action is not a popular policy.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
Not in America. You know, the majority of Americans do not favor discriminating against people based on innate characteristics like that. You know,
Yeah.
Americans for the most part believe in meritocracy, but not
Wait.
everybody, but the majority.
Is there is there a definitive time, Devon, like a definitive year that you can look back to and be like, this is where it all changed?
Yes, there is, but it goes beyond just the military. This kind of goes to the heart of the nation.
Yeah, let's go. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, now you're going to get me going because
get going, Devon. I love it. I love it.
This all goes back to around the 1960s, particularly 1962, right?
Okay.
So in 1962, you had the Supreme Court case where they took prayer out of school, right? And that was Engel versus Vitale. You know, so this is the start of the devolution of the nation, not the military itself.
She was a woman, correct?
I think she was. I don't remember.
Yeah, and she was like an
think about our nation. Think about our nation and how it was on an upward slope, and how we'd fought 2 world wars. We fought our Civil War and 2 world wars, and we were as strong as we ever were, and we were always on the up and up. And now let's think about the United States since 1962. Okay, and we've been sort of on the downhill and on the downslope. So that's just the inflection point that you were talking about, Rodney. But then you had the legalization of the murder of babies in 1973 with Roe versus Wade.
Okay.
And then you had 1980, where the Supreme Court struck down in a Kentucky law, which required a copy of the 10 Commandments be posted in the classroom. You know, so the Supreme Court struck that down. And then in the 1990s and the 2000s, you had American presidents pressuring Israel to give away land for peace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, that's a whole other conversation.
That is a recipe. What had been the recipe for America's rise and being on the up and up? Our support for Israel.
Yeah.
Okay. Even for Jews.
Zionism.
Yeah, but even before that, the Jews, George Washington welcomed the Jews into America, and then every president thereafter, we never oppressed them. We always welcomed them, and they were always welcome to be here and be our citizens. And then we liberated the Nazi concentration camps in World War II, and then
the
one
whole
of the
world
absolute biggest pluses for America was when President Harry S. Truman recognized the Jewish state in 1948 when it became a nation, immediately, the day of, within hours. And this was America's height of power. And then you have in the 1990s and the 2000s, you have American presidents pressuring Israel to give away land for peace. This is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Then you have the 10 Commandments monuments being ordered, being taken out of courthouses in Alabama and in Oklahoma. You have gay marriage being authorized in 2015 by Supreme Court case. And these are just this all starts in 1962, and it's just a downward slope from 1962. And to tell you the truth, I'm really, really fearful for our country because
yeah, absolutely. I am too, Devin. I am too.
This is America committing national suicide.
Yeah, for sure.
This is
intentionally by somebody, by some mind or collection of minds. Somebody wants America to not exist anymore. I really think it's blatantly obvious.
Or just to exist as a, you know,
as
one
a global
of many
state.
nations.
Yeah.
Here's what Abraham Lincoln said. I have a quote here from him if I could read it. This is from Abraham Lincoln, quote, "Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to overstep the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe, of Asia, and of Africa combined, with all the treasures of the earth in their military chest, with a Bonaparte for commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point then is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst ourselves. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. A nation of freemen, we must live. As a nation of freemen, we must live through all time or die by suicide." End of quote.
Yeah, in America, we're geostrategically blessed, and the threat inflation of the national security state, I think, has created a situation where we're looking at those threats from abroad, and that allows, you know, domestic. I'll say domestic enemies, because people that don't want to support and defend the Constitution, because frankly, American sovereignty is baked into the Constitution. The idea that, you know, America should subject itself to, you know, an international law that's not aligned with the interests of the American people, like it's not in line with the Constitution, supporting and defending the Constitution, and defending the people of the United States. So, like, I'll just say that you know, people that have that objective are enemies of America, and this focus on external threats as if they are existential threats. You know, I think, yeah, that Abraham Lincoln quote does a great job of illustrating. You know, it's known that the external threats aren't really existential threats. The same way
Not
that
when they're all working together.
Internal threats can be. All you know, as you know, somebody with like a progressive background, I'll support, you know, everything that you said, because something that I've noticed, you know, like the separation of church and state, like really, I think the moral hazard comes when you have mass force schooling. When you have the government spending money on things, it has to be inclusive. You know, it can't pick Christianity because not everybody's Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the solution? I think is just not have the federal government control so much stuff, so that there's more private spaces. And even in spite of that, like stuff like school prayer, it's like, don't say the prayer, you know, if you don't want to, you know. But if it's 90% plus of the people,
what I'm saying, I think I agree with you, Grant. And what I'm saying is we had a really, really good recipe for 200 years, from 1776 to 1962. We had a really, really, really good recipe.
Yeah.
And we were on the up and up, and we were on the incline, and we were just amazingly blessed and successful. And the 1962 and onwards is this inflection point where we're devolving and heading downwards.
Yeah.
And my point is we had a really good recipe up till 1962.
one thing that you didn't mention as a part of that is the welfare state, you know, and LBJ's Great Society.
I
uh,
wanted to
which-
bring, I wanted to bring something up to him too, because he brought up a lot of moral cases, right? Things dealing with morality, Supreme Court, whatever. And you kind of, you brought some stuff up in the 70s. You don't have any thoughts about the Bretton Woods Agreement, the ending of that, and the, you know, the no longer silver, gold backing our money, fiat currency, you know, that type of stuff? Or do you
Oh,
think,
I do agree with you there, Rodney, quite a bit. I'm on your side on the gold standard. There's some case in points where, because we were put on the gold standard, taken off it, put on it, taken off of it, and there's some patterns, historical patterns that are just black and white, which just shows the how we were doing really good when we were on the gold standard, and how things went awry when we went on the took it off ourselves.
yeah,
off the gold standard.
it
So,
seems
yeah.
like, it really seems like, you know, ever since that agreement ended in 71 or 72, I think it was 71. But if you look at like global finances ever since then, they've been a mess, right? But what it ultimately did is, in my opinion, and maybe this is all that they wanted to do, it, well, one, it inflated all the currency, right? Making people have to work more, right? And then the cost of living and all that goes up. Now people's only thing that they can focus on in life is working and making money. That's literally it. There is no, you know, all of the life has been ripped out of everybody because they have to go be a debt slave to some employer who's paying them way underneath. And I believe in capitalism and free, like free capitalistic societies and whatnot, and the idea of economic freedom. But if there's always going to be monopolies and there's always going to be a government controlling our money, and just putting, like, legitimately putting the nation in these little traps, how much economic freedom do people really have, right? So now people don't even have time to spend time with their kids. You know, like now when they get home from work, they're just so stressed, they want the day to be done. Now you're disrupting the family, right? And I would say even before that, you know, the 1962, 1971, when they ruined the money and they started promoting, you know, mothers going to work and all this other stuff, right? I think really what I think we did is when we ended slavery in the 1860s and we ratified the 14th Amendment, we just created citizens, or federal employees, and that's all that citizens are. And our job is to work on behalf of the government, and our kids are supposed to go to school where they teach them. Grant brought this up. They're teaching the kids exactly how they want them to be in society. But now mom and dad are both stuck working because money has gone crazy. You completely ruined the dynamic of the family. And then you add in the fact that over the last 70 years, we've just been completely depleting our morals. It's okay to be, you know, it's okay to think that, it's okay to believe that people legitimately believe that they were born into the wrong body. And I don't know, that's weird to me. That's weird. I think it's, I would look at it more of like
in terms of morality, let me just steelman that real quick. They say that it's moral to affirm a child to do that and to profit off of giving them hormones that can sterilize them for life and performing surgery.
Yeah.
That is
well,
not
that's just
without
one
risk.
of them. That's
So
just one of the many things.
I don't think that that's morally defensible. Is like, if you believe it in so much, why are you profiting off
Right.
of,
Yeah.
why don't you know,
But
why
then,
don't you just volunteer? You know,
you know,
even
like,
then that's, you know, arguments can be made.
The creation of Planned Parenthood, the abortions, you know, the just the getting so far away from the commandments.
Yeah. Well, to tie
You know?
tie everything together a little bit, and then we because I want to move on and ask about like logistics stuff. Um, all that stuff with money and fiat money really it's just created incentives that um interfere with social cohesion. So everything
Yeah,
that you were saying about the
yeah.
family,
That's a good way to sum it up. Yeah,
it's interfering with social cohesion.
yeah,
It's changed the incentives around. It used to be that there were incentives that were essentially imposed by nature, where the family unit became a thing because it made sense economically. Like
yeah,
there were incentives to drive it, and then but it also just so happens that it's really socially effective at corresponding to prosperity. And there's lots of science that we could use to justify that, but you could also just look at scripture in order to justify it. So there's this convergence on something that's probably true, since it
yeah,
works from a bunch of different perspectives and can be justified a different way. And they threw that all away. Why? Because it's a lot easier to steal everybody's money when
yeah,
the power to control it's concentrated.
yeah,
When these institutions get really, really large and the power is concentrated and one person or a very small group of people have control over interest rates, all of a sudden it becomes very easy to make money by managing it and uh, you know forcefully extracting it from the population versus actually producing something of value
right.
that at a price that people can afford in order to profit.
And
So
it's not like we have to be alive during these times to recognize that they were just better. Like, I don't know if everybody feels this way, but whenever I watch something from like the 40s or 50s or 60s, I look at the family dynamic as completely different, the home dynamic as completely different, the way that children behaved, the way that parents behaved, even the way that people talked. It was just very, you could say that we've de-evolved ever since the 60s even,
Good point, Rodney.
yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think the way we can sum this up is, I mean, at least in my perspective, is that you can't thumb your nose at God and expect to be blessed as a nation. It's just not gonna. The things that you're talking about, like the removing of the gold standard and such things, I think those are symptoms of God, of thumbing your nose at God. The inflation, the mental health crisis, the rioting going on, the military defeats. I think all these are symptoms of the blessing being taken away. And
okay,
that's I think we can end. At least I can end my comments there. We can go on to the next
yeah,
subject.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if you'd like.
What?
yeah, so that resonates. I mean, I really do think that there's like we've talked about this, offline, but there's something to there's a spiritual conflict of sorts, like
Yes, absolutely.
in the frame of like a vola or whatever you want to use. Like I'm not traditionally religious. You know,
There's
Rodney's
a
not really
destruction of
traditional. You got
morals and
somewhat traditional
values.
release, yeah, but
Yeah,
it's something that we all see. I think we all feel that, and there's consequences, right?
yeah,
There's consequences when you depart from striving towards virtue and good. If there weren't consequences, then it wouldn't be virtue and good almost. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that we could probably talk about that for hours.
Yes, we could.
I'm really curious about your thoughts on uh, sending all this money and materiel to Ukraine, especially the materiel portion, because I think people get the sense that we just have unlimited stuff that we can send, and that there aren't they have an unconstrained vision, and that extends to logistics. And
Yeah,
you
Grant.
being
Remember the buzzer that you push with the red button,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Well, if I had one here, and that's the sound I would want. I'd push the button. I would go because no, absolutely not. This is not an unconstrained resource. These are finite resources, and I was the chief of ammunition for the whole army. for a few years, and these included conventional missiles. But we don't have enough capacity to replace all the stuff that we're giving away, from the stocks in Israel, from the stocks that they're taking out of South Korea, from the stocks they're taking here from the homeland. Every precision munition, every precision or piece of artillery that you send over to Ukraine is one less that you have for a Middle Eastern conflict, is one less that you have for any contingencies in the Far East, and it's one less for any defense of the homeland. Right now we have, as far as at least when I was the chief, we have 0 manufacturing lines for TNT. It's
Wow.
okay. There may have been just a small one with very little capacity. I'm not sure if that ever came through, but we were sourcing it from Eastern Europe. And the stuff that was coming out of Eastern Europe for TNT, this is TNT to go into explosives.
Yeah.
We had quality problems. So that was number one. And number two, it wasn't enough capacity to replace the munitions. And thirdly, you got to ask yourself, should we be dependent on an Eastern European country, or do we want to be dependent? I think the answer is an obvious no.
Oh, they're definitely about to do something with ammonium nitrate. I really believe that. I'm big into stocks and finances and whatnot, and I kind of like follow pieces of news, and you had like an article from the Department of Defense about how they're going to increase their ammo production, and that was happening simultaneously of European countries being told that they have to reduce their fertilizer rate by 30%. And I'm like, putting 2 and 2 together, I'm like, man, they're doing something with ammonium nitrate. I don't know what it is yet, but
well, maybe they are, maybe they're not, but the time frame, and if your viewers get nothing else, then they should take this as a takeaway. I mean, on this subject, the time frame to replace precision munitions, whether it be missiles or precision artillery, is not weeks, it's not months. It's years. The time frame to replace precision munitions and artillery is numbered in years. So again, we're not going to, there is no quick replacement here. And this is not about money either. It's not about how much money you can throw at it. The capacity, the production line, the raw materials are not sufficient to do the replacement in a quick fashion. I heard it said that if we were embroiled in a war against China over Taiwan, the U.S. military would run out of its necessary high-tech munitions within a week. I've heard that being said. You know,
Taiwan is going to be such a huge
that's
player.
how dangerous this is.
Yeah.
Now, Grant, I think I kind of interrupted you a little bit, so please keep going. I think with your thoughts.
No, that's exactly what I was. What my concern was. I think that people get this sense of an infinite world from the digital age, where it's like you can copy information with like cheap manufactured goods that aren't sophisticated that come in from China. You know, there seems to be a never-ending supply of that stuff, like right on time delivery. But I don't think people appreciate that this high-tech stuff that doesn't have a market with billions of consumers to support it, where it's a military where our active components less than half, you know,
and nobody's allowed to know
soldiers.
anything about it. How can we even?
That makes it difficult too. Where it's like even talking about this is like, oh,
it is
because
it's classified, you know, and there's not a whole lot of information that can be shared with the public. Other than the fact that I can tell you that the time frame is not weeks or months, it's years to make the replacements.
Right.
So,
and if people aren't talking about that, and if people don't know what's going on, then people have no way to know realistically whether to support sending munitions to another country that we're supposed to be helping or not.
Yeah, because they don't know the
People will just
consequences.
be like, oh, we're helping Ukraine, you know, but not really
Yeah.
understanding the position that we're putting ourselves in potentially as well. So yeah, that's interesting. I got my own thoughts about the whole Ukraine thing, so I'm not gonna get into all that, but
No, I mean we can transition into that, because that's kind of the last thing that I wanted to cover and talk about, was just that logistics piece. But I guess we can also talk about it in general, because I think it's related to all the social stuff. I think it's actually very closely related. And um my position is, like, we look at what just happened in Afghanistan, and nobody has come out publicly in our government, like in an official capacity, and said, wow, that withdrawal was really a disaster. We could have done this better.
a
XYZ.
lot of people did. They just weren't filling the seat of the current administration.
Yeah, there was the
exactly.
one courageous, I think, Marine Lieutenant Colonel battalion commander who said something who I really admire. And he called, I think he called out the Secretary of Defense and the Army Chief of Staff on it. And,
yeah, and then they haven't said anything. So my
and then
takeaway,
he got shit canned. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But my takeaway is,
or the Marine. He may have been Marine.
Yeah,
I can't
he was.
He was.
He was a
yeah.
But
he looked like a young guy too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for an 05, yeah.
I remember that video. Yeah.
But if you come out of a situation like that and you're not able to reflect and do an AAR and admit anything went wrong, when it obviously went wrong, and we're talking about a conflict that we spent 20 years trying to set something up, and it was ostensibly at a certain point we were nation building, right? And that all fell apart. So what are they trying to accomplish in the Ukraine right now? And do we have any reason to expect that it's not going to end in exactly the same fashion and just cost a lot of lives, a lot of money, in this case, a lot of material that'll leave us strategically vulnerable for potentially years, in order to accomplish maybe worse than nothing? Because from my perspective, the Ukraine and Russia would have had to have come to some sort of agreement before now, if not for the West's involvement.
We're just going to stronghold around Russia. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like
at least in my opinion, that's because Russia has
regime
always
change in Russia, because it's like that's going to cost the world a lot. I mean, we did regime change in Iraq, and maybe we shouldn't have done that.
If
you look at, how did that work out?
If you look at historically, like the countries that have always started wars or was at the, in some way involved with it, is either Germany or Russia. And it's almost always involving Russia. And it's always because Russia is denying entrance into this globalist type thing. That's the impression that I get. That's the impression that I'm getting out of it, is through NATO and through all these other countries, there's this idea of forming a globalist type state, and Russia has blocked it for a long time. What do you think, Devon?
Well, I tend to see these things through a biblical.
They're cycles.
Biblical prophecy.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is the forum to kind of go down that road, but
I'll talk with you sometime if you ever want to. I'd love to. I
kind of see these things in a biblical prophecy, through a biblical prophecy lens, and how the world's kind of setting itself up. But I can say this thing, at least, though, is the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's okay, and that we should be supporting Ukraine to an extent. Okay. I think it should be less overt. The more overt that we get, with helping out Ukraine, the more it raises the stakes,
I don't.
and the freer hand it gives for Russia to say that we're at war with them or that Europe is at war with them. So I think
risking
these
escalation.
things ought to be done behind the scenes through the CIA, on the low and low.
Okay.
And I don't think we should be giving away our strategic munitions
But
or our main battle tanks. Our main
can,
battle tanks, the Abrams, have the fire control system is classified. Now, the first thing I thought about when I heard the Biden administration and the Secretary of Defense was going to give Ukraine our main battle tank was, okay, well, what if the Ukrainians, just even one Ukrainian, got shut up, and the main battle tank partially destroyed, and that tank to get overrun, and that gives Russia a free hand to drag it back to Russia and backwards engineer it and hack into our fire control system. Not good.
Yeah, no.
You know,
so something else that I've heard is that, the bridges in that area of Europe cannot support the weight of an Abrams. So it's not even, tactically effective. And then also like all the maintenance requirements that it has.
I want to,
where we're not sending the maintenance support or the recovery capability, and that's not just the Abrams, it's a lot of the tanks that are being provided.
Well, I'm good with blankets and sundry items, and I'm good with small arms ammunition, training on the low and low.
That's what I wanted to talk about that real quick, because you had said that you believe that it should be handled internally, right, or behind the scenes, and I kind of agree. So I watched a video that I seen on YouTube yesterday, and it was of Trump talking about munitions, and he talked about how the term nuke was never used after World War II. It was just an unwritten rule. No world leaders used it, and now world leaders are just throwing it around because nobody respects the Biden administration, and so on and so forth. But when he was talking about World War III, and he's like, World War III is going to be unlike anything that we've ever seen before, worse than World War I, worse than World War II. And in my mind, I'm like, why are you telling your people this? You know what I mean? Like, this seems very fear-mongering, fear tactic, very like, this probably isn't something that I would do as a president, just to try to.
Who are we talking about, Rodney? Who are you talking about right
now? So I'm talking about Trump, a video that I seen of Trump talking about World War III, nukes, stuff like that yesterday. And I told my wife, I was like, because he made comments of World War III, and I feel like that's been getting thrown around a lot. Nukes has been getting thrown around a lot. And I'm like, man, why are these presidents coming out and saying it in a way that would realistically probably scare the shit out of the people, right? Instead of, figuring out amongst themselves, right? Working it out and then telling the people, hey, like, we're figuring it out. Not saying it in a way that's going to scare people or think that a nuke is going to drop on their city at any time, but in a way that supplies the people with hope and faith in their government that they are going to sort it out, right? But at the same time, when you said that it should be kept on the low and low, I also think people don't know enough one way or another about Ukraine or Russia to support one way or another. And right off the bat, as soon as this Ukraine stuff happened, you seen this like brainwashing across America where everybody's icon image was a Ukraine flag and everybody was in support of Ukraine. And you're like, this just unfolded. You guys have no idea what's going on. And I feel like when we keep stuff on the low and low, people don't hear about stuff. and that, you know, that could be good because you're not scaring the public, but it could also be bad because the people have no idea what they're even supporting. So I think that there needs to be a dialogue between the governments and the people, and really, like, who are all these people to be making all these decisions anyways? You know what I mean? Like, these
Well, on the
people
low and low thing, I think of it like we did with the Soviets in Afghanistan. You know, in Afghanistan, we only had the CIA there, and they were helping on the low and low.
You're talking about in
And
'89, right?
That worked out pretty good for the U.S. I mean, not what happened afterwards, but as far as kicking the Soviet Union's butt out of Afghanistan, that was a pretty good tactic.
Right. So more like covert operations, going in without necessarily going in, and kind of him. But now it's to the point where everybody knows that we're in. So now that we know that we're in, you know, why can't we be more upfront and honest and talk about certain stuff? And, you know, nobody has any idea what's going on, and nobody's being honest to the people. And I think that's pretty obvious. Nobody, the people have no idea. We're all lost.
Let me just say real quick for the record, I don't think the CIA does almost anything positive.
Oh yeah, I don't either. I don't either.
That's a perfect example of Afghanistan. It's like, it seemed like, hey, great, but and then there's long-term consequences.
No, I got it. I mean, I'm saying up to a point where they were up to the point where the Soviets were retreating, our tactics were pretty good and it worked. I'm not talking about the after effect. I'm talking about
and I'm not
getting him out of the country.
Criticizing. I'm not.
No, I wasn't either. I'm just
saying
to make that
I'm just
point
saying.
known.
I'm just stating my position.
No, I agree.
So I had one other question about munitions. And I sent it to you previously. Are you familiar with loitering munitions at all? Because I know that was like something that was talked about. That was going to.
Yes, I am somewhat. Mm-hmm.
What
do you have any
loitering?
opinions on it that you could share? Yeah, loitering munitions. It's like they send them up out of like artillery or whatever, and they loiter above the battlefield, and then can detect the enemy and come down and destroy it.
Well, they definitely have a place. They definitely have a place on the battlefield, the modern battlefield. The special ops use them a lot, or at least it's in their tactical toolkit. You know, these are just basically small drones, like quadcopters with munitions on them that can.
I know what ones you're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah, which can loiter above the battlefield for hours at a time, and you can strike at will. They're not being shot and then dropped immediately on the target. They're loitering over the battlefield to where you can use them effectively at any type of precision point. So yeah, they have a place on the modern battlefield, and if we don't do it, the enemy is, and so you got to go down this road.
It's almost like Tesla's Starlink, if people can imagine, like the constellation of satellites or whatever that like fly together. Or if anybody ever watched a drone show where they like fly in like fleets, that's what you're talking about, right? But they're way up. They can stay up there for a long time. They got like thermal and whatnot, able to be viewed from somebody else completely, entirely remotely, and then they're just up there ready to be accessed whenever they need them. That's the one.
I mean, just imagine a quadcopter. You know, these little bitty drones with 4 helicopter blades on them, really small, and just think of those being flown above a battlefield for half an hour, hour and a half at a time, and until you see the proper target that you want to hit, and then sending that drone on a suicide mission with the munitions it has to take out the target.
Yeah, reduces the amount of time it takes to pull it.
Not only time, but you don't have to physically be there. You know, with your
no planes getting shot down.
Yeah, gives flexibility
with your plane or with your combat platform on the battlefield. You launch this thing from tens of miles away, so you don't have to physically be there on the battlefield.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I bet the little fleet signature, the little fleet of drones signature is probably so small it probably doesn't even trip radar. I don't know. I would
Yeah, I
imagine
mean,
you would need a
using
large
it near,
object.
yeah, using it in global war on terror is going to be different than near peer enemies, because then they have like jamming capabilities and all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff. But yeah, I was just curious to get your thoughts on that. Thanks for sharing. We've been running almost 2 hours now. Just to close up, talking about leadership, talking about things that have happened culturally. I know you kind of look at everything going on in terms of prophecy. Is there any wisdom that you can share, gained from your years of experience as a leader, and how you can apply that leadership today in the current environment we face to potentially help move the country in a more positive direction? And kind of, if we are in this spiritual battle that we all kind of agree is going on, how do we provide, how would you recommend providing leadership to advance the side of light?
Where does humanity go from here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, we have to elect godly people, righteous people into these places of government at the local, state, and the federal level. And we need people who are going to take bold action, because more of the same is not going to work.
Right.
What Einstein said, that
the definition of
repeating
insanity.
the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of idiocy and stupidity.
Yeah.
Exactly correct. We can't expect a different outcome if we keep doing the same thing or going down the same road. I really liked what during this Speaker of the House vote, where it went to 15 or 16 votes. I was in the cheerleading section for the 20 holdouts, or the 20 Republican holdouts.
The populist wing. That's why I'm a fan of populism.
Because they were holding out for something that was principled, and they were stood for what they believed. And in the end, at the 15th or 16th vote, they won a laundry list of concessions. Whether you look at some of them being personal, it doesn't matter, because even if there were some personal ones, and they're like getting placed on a committee themselves.
Yeah, but that's
there were other ones
that's
that
who I want on those committees.
There were other ones that there were other concessions that benefited the whole House, that are a huge watershed change compared to the way the House was run in the past 15 or 20 years. And it's a lot more, the rules now are a lot more libertarian, where people have a bigger voice at the ground level. So however you see that, I see that as a recipe about how we can get things done. If we can just elect people who are principled like that, who are well, I mean, those 20 people were being maligned and attacked and canceled, and not only by they were being cheered on by the other side of the aisle, but internally on their own side, they were being derided. But
it's the establishment.
Whether you like them personally or not, or the way they went about it, they achieved something pretty remarkable. And so it's things like that. And think about the Tea Party movement back in 2010. They achieved something, even if it was for a moment or for a number of years. The Marco Rubios, I think the Ted Cruzes, the Rand Pauls, those people were Tea Party people, and they've made a pretty big difference. And so, the Tea Party movement, these 20 rebels, so-called rebels in the speaker vote, we need to do these same kind of things, but even on a grander scale. Now the solutions to the world, I mean, obviously I don't believe are political. But if we're going to turn the ship back the other way, we've got to take bold action. I just think we got to elect godly leaders at the, or you can say, if you're not a Christian, you can just say righteous leader or
People of
principled
good moral
leaders.
character. Yeah.
People of, I mean, real moral character who are not afraid to be canceled. I mean,
right.
you know,
Everybody's so scared to speak up nowadays. And it's like people, and so I left the army because of the vaccine. And it seemed like all of the leaders that I thought were once there for me were no longer there for me. Nobody cared about my religious views. Nobody cared how I felt about it. And I seen my whole worldview change, like completely. I'm like, damn, here I am, advocating for all my soldiers, and who's advocating for me? Oh, all my bosses that are afraid to get in trouble by their boss. So even though they know that something is wrong, they still don't speak up because people, people feel like they don't have a choice, or like perfect example, the vaccine, and the amount of people that said that they weren't going to take it. And then once the going got tough and jobs were threatened, that's threatening somebody's livelihood to take away somebody's job. So is somebody really going to speak up in a manner that's going to get them in trouble to the point where they could potentially get, kicked out? Probably not. It's not really the odds of finding somebody that is going to speak up in those circumstances is so slim to none nowadays. It's so hard to find real, genuine people to surround yourself with. And I feel like it's because everybody, it probably goes into what you were saying. Over the last 70 years, they've just made people extremely immoral. And people only care about themselves at the end of the day. People are only worried about themselves, their own comfortability, their own situation in life. And if they're ever in a position, or if they're ever put in a position that's going to make that safety a little bit uncomfortable for them, they're probably going to go with the flow. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish more people would speak up when things were going bad. Now, at the same time, like, pick your fights. Don't be the person that complains, whines, bitches, moans about every little thing. But there are absolutely battles in life that people should be speaking up about, and nobody is. And you're like, dude, what is wrong with all of you guys? Like, legitimately, sometimes I'm like, what is wrong with with everybody that's around me, and I don't want to feel like that. I got slammed the other day with 5 tickets for accidentally mentioning to the cop that, yeah, the army pushed on with their whole vax thing, and I went on with my whole life. He said, or I went on with my life. He came back to my car and slammed me. And I'm under the impression that I have this tendency to think that everybody thinks like I do, and maybe the TV is just lying to me. And maybe the stuff that I'm seeing on social media is lying to me, and people aren't as jacked up as what I think they are. And everybody feels how I feel, and everybody's seeing it, and everybody's feeling it. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. I don't think many people are seeing it, and many people are knowing it. And perhaps, if you look at a biblical perspective, or if you're a person that looks at it from a biblical perspective, maybe you could say that the people that are able to see it are ones that were given the gift to see it. I don't know. But at the same time, I'm like, how is humanity this brainwashed to not stand up for what's right when the time comes? And all because they're scared, but I don't know, personal courage, lack of personal courage, lack of integrity. I don't know what it is, but I feel like everybody's scared. I don't know.
Well, I don't live in fear, and the mass media and the people who are behind these things don't scare me whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not scared of a World War III because I know the world doesn't end
at
with a
the end.
nuclear holocaust. That's
Yeah.
number one.
Yep.
Number two, I'm not scared of the global warming thing because I know the world doesn't end that way either. So
Right.
in my worldview, neither of these things make me flinch or scare me whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Um,
So, but you can resonate with what I'm saying though,
I do.
right? Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, because I think it adds into what you're saying of like finding these people, and that's the real issue, and then once these people are presented to you and put into these positions, how do you like, make there's not really a way, but it would be nice to know that these people aren't just full of crap and saying whatever they need to say to get into the seat. But then once they're in the seat, a way for us to hold them accountable. And I feel like right now there is really there's no way to hold anybody accountable.
Yeah, that's why you have to pick the right people. I mean, I think this.
But we're supposed to be able to.
Oh yeah. Well, it's that's complicated. That's a whole nother.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I think Devon, him bringing up the speaker vote, I think that is just the perfect way to encapsulate what's going on. Like essentially, we have 20 folks that care about their constituents. Above their own personal interests, because the uniparty they're a part of a different class. Their priority is not their constituents. And the only way that we're going to get people like that is of people of principle, because the incentives are all aligned to make you not care, because your constituents liking you, well, that can be influenced by the media doing right by them in spite of that, in spite of huge gaps in spending, where FTX took hundreds of millions, billions of dollars,
$200 billion in it,
gave it to uniparty candidates and didn't support any populist candidates, because they know that's like the gig is up, the lines and the fight are clear between people that care about the country, national sovereignty, America, politicians that care about their constituents, versus politicians that want to be a part of the club.
Yeah.
So one more thing on strategy, besides what I already said.
Yeah.
We've got to get rid of lobbying. We've got to find some sort of word or verbiage that would pass constitutional muster and outright outlaw lobbying. This is the bane of Washington, D.C. and of the Congress, and it's corrupt, it's sickening, it's dragging the government down, it's burdensome, it's evil, because of the influences that these lobbying companies and people, and the money that's being thrown at people to influence votes. So you fix this thing strategically the way I first said it, and the two-prong approach is you got to outlaw lobbying, and you got to find the right constitutional verbiage to write the law correctly.
And I would say to support that, something else you would need to do at the same time. So it's like the order is like you have to have these principled folks in order to have the courage to do something like that. But in order to make sure that criminals don't just circumvent that, the real problem is the amount of power that's concentrated in Washington, D.C., their ability to pick winners and losers at every level of the economy, and make people very rich and destroy other people's businesses that aren't willing to get in line. And as long as they have that power, no amount of stuff that's written down on paper is going to prevent people from wielding that power.
They don't follow it anyways.
Special interests. No, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like, by all means, write the law
doesn't apply to them.
Write the laws to make it clear what the intent is, but without distributing that power across state, federal, like state governments, local governments, it wouldn't matter. And that transitions me into another question, which is, aside from politics and leadership, like a big thing that I think is critical is just being active in your own community, which is hard
Yeah.
on active duty because you're not in a, we're all kind of deracinated individuals that are thrown together, and we try and establish friendships, but you know, everybody's in and out every 3 years.
Yeah.
So for folks that aren't moving around, you establishing roots within your community and being involved, I think is an important part of all this. But I just want
I
to get your
agree.
thoughts on that, Tevin.
Could you word the question one more time and just real quick,
just
sum it up?
Just is there anything?
Oh, getting involved in the local community?
Yeah, like using your leadership skills, whatever leadership skills you have, in order to get involved in the community and increase the cohesion of the community and power and capability of the people around you.
Yeah, well, I think that's a noble ideal, and yeah, I agree with that. I think the question is where are you gonna put your efforts in?
Right. That's what I was just gonna say. It's hard
I
to
don't
know
know.
where
Yeah.
it's hard to know where to start, you know, like do you just because I was telling Grant the other day, and I was telling my wife as well. I was like, man, I really want to start getting involved in the community or into politics or something. And then it just so happened that I had two things fall into my lap that is gonna allow me to do just that. But one involving the school board, and then the other one involving the ticket that I got. But it was just like obvious corruption. It's like, okay, I'm gonna say something about this. Like this needs to be talked about. So that's the problem, is like knowing where to go. And then not only that, the people that you're hoping to talk to, which is the rest of the community, they're not there. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
I'll tell you a quick story. One thing is I became a little bit disappointed because when I was in Alabama at my last duty station, and also here, I'm a little bit disappointed in the RNC because I personally volunteered to be a door knocker and to volunteer in any way that they needed me. And I expressed this on their website, and I was flabbergasted, absolutely flabbergasted that I didn't get a single phone call or contact
right.
when I volunteered to do that. Now, I was in Alabama and in Utah. Both of those are pretty red strongholds, and maybe they were focused elsewhere. But I didn't get anything.
I mean, I think that might be a symptom of
yeah,
the
where I was at
chair.
geographically,
Well,
maybe.
no, just the like Rhonda McDaniel. I think
That's true.
Harmeet Dillon or Mike Lindell.
Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I was disappointed there, but you know, instead of getting involved in some sort of organization, I am involved personally myself. I'll tell you a little bit about what I do personally. So I have what I call a windshield ministry, and what I do is I make my own homemade flyers.
Okay.
Okay, and they're all just one page, and I don't hand them out to people myself because people always when you hand something to somebody, people are always thinking about what's your motive, what's your why are you doing this, and they're judging you on what kind of clothes you're wearing or
what are you trying to sell me?
What kind of facial hair you have or whatever, So when I stop my car in a parking lot, I put these on windshields underneath the windshield wiper.
That's a really good idea.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that way there's no personality behind it. They're just reading or not, if they choose not to.
Right.
The message that you're trying to communicate.
But right.
But they at least gotta pick it up off the windshield.
Right.
Get it out of the way, so it's in their hands. So you're already halfway there.
And the attempt was made by you. You know what I mean? Like you did your part to try to spread your message. You put your message out there. They either received it or they didn't. But at the end of the day, you did what makes you feel good. Yeah.
And sometimes a couple times, once a month, I'll buy about 20 or 30 of these little small booklets. They're not books, but they're little booklets on certain topics. And again, I'll put those on people's windshields. They're really fast, easy reads. Um, they're information that they probably wouldn't get elsewhere. So that's the way I've chosen to impact my local community. And I think because I've been doing that for about 15 or 20 years, I think I've probably impacted directly probably in the tens of thousands of people. And if you think about the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth level effect
Right. Yeah.
of people either passing that on or learning something and then regurgitating that to somebody else, whether they have it in front of them or not, just from their memory, then you can think about it as throwing a stone out in the water and all the different rings.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah.
Ripple effect.
Yeah, the ripple effect. So it's just just by doing that.
I like that.
Yeah,
I do. So do you also have a ministry like an in-person?
No, this is all my personal thing, and I just spend my personal money on. It's just
okay.
It's just something I do. You know, I'm with a certain amount of money I have per month.
I got you. I just wasn't sure if you had a place where people come congregate.
No, I don't. This is just something I do personally, and just set aside 30 minutes or an hour a month, and
are these same messages that or booklets or whatever? Do you have them on a website or anything? Or
I have them in. I have them on PowerPoint, and what I do is I use a pair of scissors and I print 2 per page and I cut them out.
I gotcha.
And so I always have copies of them in my car, and every time I stop the car, as long as it's not raining out or it's bad weather,
right?
I
was just
get out of my car and I'll grab 2 or 3 of them, and on my way into the grocery store, I'll just pick three cars randomly, and I'll put them on people's windshields. And so it's not burdensome. I don't go out and blanket a whole parking lot or something like that.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Every little stop I make, I just get out and I hit 2 or 3 windshields, and
I gotcha. No, I was just saying if you had somewhere that the viewing audience could come read some of the stuff or whatever, but that's fine. Yeah, no. Either way, that's cool.
What's up, Grant? No, this is really low scale and low budget.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine.
So I just to close this out, what I imagine it's like you home make these, and I imagine the message changes every once in a while. What's your favorite message to try and communicate? And we can close with that.
Yeah, what's the message that you want to send to the world?
Yeah, like when you're because it's if it fits on a half a PowerPoint slide. And
well, so one of my favorite ones is to get people thinking about the abortion issue. So think of it like this: one of them uses somewhat these exact words, and it's really just a thinking experiment. So one of the headlines is part of a woman's body, and it's underlined, right? And then we start to ask three essential questions, because this we always hear that it's part of the woman's body, right? So the first question is if a woman never becomes pregnant, is she missing part of her body? Right? If you're saying it's part of the body, if she never becomes pregnant, is she missing part of her body? The second question is if she's pregnant and she gives birth to the birth canal or cesarean section and the baby's outside of her womb now, is she missing part of her body? That's a different question. So 2 questions. If you never get pregnant, are you missing part of your body? If you've given birth and your baby's no longer in your body, are you missing part of your body? And if the baby's part of your body is the third one, then why does your body have a certain immune response and protection for the placenta and the baby that's in your womb that protects it, and considers, because it's got different DNA and your body's not recognizing it, your body is not attacking it, why is there a special mechanism in place if it's part of your body? You know, and I don't have it memorized here. I didn't regurgitate that exactly, but that's the essential point.
Yeah, no, that makes sense with
Yeah.
RH factor. If it's not
You
the
know, so
same,
I'm
it's
not
right
trying to
there for
preach or to
building.
tell you to think a certain way. I'm just giving you some, I want you to think about this. This is the dribble that you hear by certain people, you know? And so think, if that's true, then what about these three questions?
Yeah.
And how do you match that up with what people are saying?
Yeah, I agree completely. It's not, they're not honest with the debate. It's like
They're not honest with the debate.
It's not a part of the body. Really, you're just weighing the mother's right to
Right.
terminate a pregnancy versus the
my
rights of
body,
an
my
unborn child.
choice.
Right,
Yeah.
my body.
My
Look,
body,
but
my
it's-
choice. My
But
body,
there is an unborn child, and it's like the
Right.
question is, does that unborn child have rights? And people can disagree on that, but that's what you're talking about. It's to pretend like there's no unborn child.
Right. Yeah.
That's not reasonable. It's whether
Yeah.
or not that unborn child has rights is what
Yeah.
you're trying to
see, with that one, it's just, it doesn't, your words don't pass the common sense test for people
Right.
who are saying that. So I'm just trying to expose the lack of common sense that anybody can
Yeah.
connect to.
People
you're
need to
trying to attack the
apply.
propaganda.
Yeah.
People need to apply the common sense test to more stuff. I feel like nobody does. Like, people don't like analyze and sit there and say, you know, that really just doesn't make any sense. I think a lot of us do, but I think a good majority of the population is just like, yeah, yep, that's what they're telling me, so that's what I'm going to go with. It just blows my mind. It really blows my mind.
And what I was thinking about doing, Grant, and maybe you can help me out, and maybe you can too, Rodney, is I wanted to make one of these same things too, having to do with exposing Google. That was my next. That's my next project, and it's got to be condensed. It would be like on a probably 6 inches by 3 inches piece of paper, something, because the longer you make it or the thicker you make it, people are not going to have to spend the time to go it. But if it's on a 6 inch by 3 inch piece of paper and it's only got certain amount of points, if you just give some things for people to think about and give them some things that they didn't really know, then they start to, you know, it's like Neo in the Matrix, right? I can't remember which pill it is, but he's taking he
takes the red pill.
He takes the red pill. It's like
red and blue, Democrats,
6 inch by
Republicans.
3 inch piece of paper being the red pill, you know. So
yeah.
And
it is true.
Some things come to mind with the curated search results, like the way that it auto completes. If you let it start auto completing everything that you say, like
there are so many things.
You
there are so many things that if you could just boil down the most shocking ones and put it on a 6 inch by 3 inch piece of paper and make it visually nice to look at, and put those expose points about Google on there, you're going to wake up a lot of people.
People like stuff that looks nice and pretty too. And what you're saying about the length of it does. I mean, it matters. Statistically speaking, people are only going to watch 10 minutes of this video.
Yeah. I think that's something that we could definitely work on.
Yeah, but if we could collaborate on something like that, then even if you two don't want to, well, then you can at least help me develop it, and then I'll be the one who's putting it on people's windshields, and I'm not scared whatsoever.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
The thing that's really,
and you know what, me and my brother used to watch. We used to watch the old Speed Racer cartoon. It came out in the 60s and 70s. I think it was a Japanese-made cartoon.
Yeah.
There was this character in there called Racer X. You know, Racer X was Speed Racer's long-lost brother, and he always showed up. He was always in the background doing things in the background and helping out Speed Racer in the background. And he wore a mask over his face that covered his eyes. And I've always kind of, that's kind of stuck with me ever since I saw that cartoon. It's kind of like a righteous, good character. And so just somebody who stays in the background doing the right thing and, helping out his brother and helping out in bad situations. And I'm no Racer X, but I kind of make that as sort of like somebody who I'd like to be is who's in the background, the Racer X,
It's your spirit
heading up,
animal.
Yeah,
Huh?
spirit animal. So, yeah,
It's your spirit animal.
my
Racer
handle,
X.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's my Zoom candle, right? It's Racer
Yeah.
X.
Yeah, Racer X. Love it.
Handing out these the truths and putting it on people's windshields. And,
Yeah, I would.
never seeing me.
I would love to help you out with that. I've been telling my wife, I was like, man, for the last 2 years, like if you get on Google and YouTube right now, you're gonna find a whole lot of stuff that has been censored and blocked and deleted for the last 2 years. And now all of a sudden the same platforms that wouldn't let you talk about stuff, now they're talking about the same stuff that you weren't allowed to talk about. And it's like there's this narrative switch now where it's really just meant to confuse the hell out of everybody.
Yeah,
Because
there's
now,
definitely
like they're
fertile ground.
they're manipulating like what we can see, when we can
It's
see
horrible.
it, how
It's,
we can see it.
horrible and it's very I'm not scared, but I'll use the word scary, but
It's
I'm not
scary.
scared.
Yeah, it is. It's scary.
Because
So,
you know what? It's that night. It's unbelievable the way that the author of 1984, how he wrote that novel in the late 1940s, and how all of that has just absolutely come true. It's just the guy was I don't know if he was a bona fide prophet, but what he said definitely came true.
George
It's
Orwell.
amazing.
A lot of it was already going on in the Soviet Union, so a lot of it wasn't even speculative. So, but Devon, thanks so much for taking this time with us. It was just great opportunity to pick your brain a little bit and talk about fifth generation leadership.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I would like to also say thank you. And 30 plus years is nothing to scoff at. I only did 13 and I had frustrations, so I can only imagine, after 3 decades of nonstop cycles and changes and just the rat race that is the military. I tip my hat to you. You definitely obviously had a very promising career and have made a very big name for yourself. Just simple Google searches, hopping on your LinkedIn, shows that you've had a very impressive career. You have a lot of achievements, and you're obviously a person that wants to make a difference. So I appreciate the time that you spent coming on with us, and we would love to have you back at any time. And
thank you very much. I'd like to come back and maybe we can talk about the COVID shot.
Oh man,
I
I'd
have
love
a lot
to.
of things to
I'd
say
love
there,
to.
and
or
if you want to talk about the nation of Israel and
I'd love to do that too.
And America's connection to it, or something like that. I'm all ears, and I'd love to come back.
Absolutely.
Well, until next time then. Next time.
All righty.
Sounds
good, guys.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.